Joining us live today is Natalie Brunell, host of the Coin Story podcast, which is ranked in the top 100 with dozens of appearances on Fox Business, advocating for and educating viewers about Bitcoin. Natalie, she has had 2 Emmy nominations and an Emmy win for Best Spot News coverage, with the mission to educate and inspire both women and men about Bitcoin. Natalie hosts Women in Bitcoin events, a movement that I see as vital and cannot wait to dive into. Natalie's Coin Stories has led her to interview the biggest and brightest minds and advocates for Bitcoin, including Michael Saylor, Jack Mallers, Lynn Alden, Preston Pish, Jeff Booth, Greg Foss, Adam Back, to name a few. Without further ado, let's dive straight into the interview. Natalie, such a pleasure to be able to have you here today on G'day Crypto. How are you today?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing well. How are you?
Yeah, really, really well. Thank you. I know originally you came from Poland when I think is when you're about 5 years old, or when you're a little child, your parents came over. Do you remember what that was like being an immigrant family and how that sort of led you? Because very different being a 5-year-old child going through that, the path that you've taken and where you are now in life, like talking to the biggest and brightest minds. What's that story arc?
Oh, for sure. Well, that experience really shaped me. I saw my parents work so hard, and also they fled communism. My parents grew up under a very concentrated power, top-down control regime, and there was no sense of upward mobility, and there was no sense of being able to really control your destiny. And so they always dreamt of coming to the United States, especially my mom. She would watch American movies, and she dreamt up this life here that offered more opportunity. And so she wanted her kids to be raised here. She wanted her kids to get an education here so that they could pursue whatever their dreams were. So my parents were in their late 30s, early 40s when they were finally able to come to the US. I was 5. So I feel very lucky in the sense that it was easy for me to assimilate into the culture. I was able to learn English very, very quickly. But at the same time, I always felt like kind of the odd kid out. My parents were immigrants. They didn't speak English very well. I felt different. We had a lot less money. My parents always struggled and worked multiple jobs. And so I knew where we came from, and I very much had a fire lit under me to want to pursue my dreams and succeed. I wanted to justify the sacrifices that they made by immigrating and starting their lives over in their 30s and 40s. I wanted to make sure that I was going to work hard and make them proud. And so I think it made me very ambitious and very much wanting to go out there and succeed. And I didn't realize that I was entering into a world where that mission was going to get harder and harder. In my opinion, and I've shared this on my show, I feel like the American dream has died a little bit, and it's in need of a revival and a renaissance, because today you can't accomplish with the same amount of work what you could several decades ago. You can't afford the same house. You can't afford the college education because of what they've done to our money. And so I hope that Bitcoin can fix some of these problems and level the playing field a little bit so that you can dream an American dream, you can dream an Australian dream, you can dream a Nigerian dream, and we can all have a little bit more opportunity around the world to provide for our families and for ourselves.
How interesting. I think everywhere around the world, Australia, America, like you're saying, it has gotten hard to be able to realize that dream. I think you have realized your dream, at least in talking to the biggest, brightest people. One of the things you brought up is Bitcoin changes the money problem and will allow more people to realize a dream. Like Bitcoin's this crazy magic internet money on the web. How would you break it down to people and get them to understand what this technology is doing and maybe what it can achieve further down the track for people?
Sure. So I think the thing that Bitcoin made me realize is that I didn't understand money. I didn't understand how it was created. I didn't understand who had the first advantage when it came to who's closest to the money printer. I didn't really know what money printing was before Bitcoin. And so I think that's where you really have to start, because when you zoom out, what we just mentioned earlier, right? Life gets more expensive every single year. The things that matter, that being able to provide a home for you and your family, it's becoming out of reach for many people, even though they're working jobs that supposedly are getting easier and more efficient with technology, yet they're not able to afford a house anymore. My generation, millennials, so many people complain that they can't afford real estate, or they're living with their parents until they're 40. And then it gets worse as you progress down in terms of younger generations as well. And so you have to sit there and go, well, what's wrong? Why, if technology is supposed to make our lives easier and things cheaper around us, and more people are getting access to things that they didn't have access to many years ago, then why is it so much harder to afford, say, a middle class life, or to be able to provide for your family, to plan for your retirement? And you realize that there's a problem. And the problem is that we have a very small group of people who are in charge of the money. They essentially manipulate the cost of capital. They change interest rates. They print money. They send all that money to the banks. The very few, the people at the top, get access to that money first. And there's a wealth concentration and a wealth effect that happens that doesn't impact and doesn't help the majority of people. And so Bitcoin kind of aims at the heart of that, because there shouldn't be a monopoly on money. It should be a level playing field where we compete based on our skills and our entrepreneurship and the value we bring to the table. And the rules should be fair and set for everyone. They shouldn't be rigged to help a couple of people that have the most amount of money to the disadvantage of everybody else. And so Bitcoin really solves that through technology. It's a form of hard money that has a finite supply, an absolute cap of 21 million, because you don't need an expanding money supply. The more money you print doesn't make society wealthier. And it's truly decentralized, like the internet. So in the same way that the internet really transformed our lives, revolutionized businesses and what we were able to do in terms of communicating and sending information, Bitcoin's going to do the same thing, but for sending value and for sort of reorganizing how we economically transact with one another. So I'm really excited and inspired by the future that Bitcoin can bring, because I think it's one of hope. I think it's one of prosperity and abundance in a way that we have not been able to achieve in a long time.
That's awesome. I guess I want to phrase this with, I also believe Bitcoin's the greatest form of money, and humans have engineered it to be able to literally be the best form of money. That's why it was created. But would governments not be afraid of the power that this can, like, it can change the whole world? With hard money, you've got less wars, food, inflation, cost of living. Everything should get better on a hard money standard. If they lose access to the money printers, is this why we're seeing this Operation Choke Point 2.0, especially in America, the SEC going after recently Coinbase, Binance, the banking system, the on and off rails? Is this a coordinated attack to pull Bitcoin out of the mainstream mind, or because Bitcoin's decentralized, there's nothing they can do to stop it, so they're just trying to discredit the crypto space in general? Or what do you see going on right now with all of that?
I don't buy into a lot of the bearish conspiracy theory narratives that are out there. I actually don't think that policymakers are trying to ban or eliminate Bitcoin. We've seen massive institutions get in. We're seeing accounting rules change. We're seeing Congress members and even presidential candidates talk about the power of Bitcoin and why we actually need this technology. I had the chance to visit Washington, D.C. and sit with some congressional members who really understand that the U.S. needs to embrace Bitcoin like they embraced the internet, and they see the national security implications of something like Bitcoin. So I think that what's happening right now is really just regulators and policymakers going after the crypto space, which is largely opaque and has many unregistered securities and companies that are essentially operating and taking in money when they're not fully disclosing what their operations are and the risks that exist to investors. And so some of these exchanges have done things that, are a little bit questionable, if not some completely outright egregious. And it's not fair that people lose money, right? People work hard for their money, and a lot of people have gone into this space because, again, they want to protect their purchasing power and they're hoping to take care of their families and, buy their dream house and all that. I get that more than anyone. But if there are people out there and tokens or companies that are operating in a way that's not ethical and aren't registering and aren't coming into compliance with the laws that currently exist, then I think that they, should be held accountable. I think people need to be transparent. Bitcoin is all about transparency and honesty and recreating a system that we can actually trust, because the one that we have all these intermediaries and people who are in power that nobody trusts anymore. So I think actually these lawsuits are providing clarity in the sense that they're not going after Bitcoin. They're going after companies that may or may not have done some things that are unethical or potentially harmful to investors. And people should have some understanding of what they're investing in. A lot of these cryptocurrencies are securities. I think that people should understand what they're investing in so that they don't lose their money. And I overall see this as a very bullish movement, because I think that a lot of that capital will move into Bitcoin. I think more people will really understand and appreciate the difference. And I think 5-10 years from now, we're not going to have 20,000 tokens. A lot of the meme coins that are pump and dump scams. I think we're going to have Bitcoin, and people will understand what it is, and it's going to be a very powerful savings technology that the US will embrace. Now, do they want to have their eyes on money and where it moves? Absolutely. They don't like privately issued stable coins. They don't like when things are offshore. They want things in a way that they can see and track. So there will be some questions about Bitcoin and privacy and all of that. But I ultimately think that Bitcoin will be embraced and more people will adopt it. And again, it will be that powerful savings technology so that people can escape inflation, which now is just, it's unstoppable. They have to keep printing and inflating and debasing our money in order to inflate away the debt. And the debt is just growing and growing. So we need something like Bitcoin now more than ever.
100%. And I really hope, in the next couple of years, like you, we get rid of those 20,000 odd cryptos that are out there. One thing I want to ask you about is, say we do have a CBDCs issued by the central banks or whatever, that allows money to use, or people to use the CBDC, go into Bitcoin. Everything's on the Bitcoin like blockchain, so they can track it. So they probably don't have an issue with that. But with these other 20,000 cryptocurrencies, why has Bitcoin stayed the number one? Do you not think out of those 20,000, there's better technology out there? People came up with the Bitcoin idea, they've improved on it. Why is Bitcoin still the one that's talked about?
Once you've invented the wheel, you don't need to reinvent it. Bitcoin is the one that's truly decentralized. It has the most capital in it because it is decentralized and absolutely scarce, and you can't recreate that. The network effect is really powerful, and I think that the other tokens that exist, some are outright scams. Others are trying to create innovation, but I just argue, what are you technically solving that Bitcoin doesn't solve, especially if you scale it on secondary or third layers? A lot of them are not ethically sound. A lot of them are, again, they're almost trying to reinvent the wheel when you could just really focus on Bitcoin, which is dispersed around the globe. It cannot be hacked. It has all of that energy backing it. So you can't manipulate it. It's immutable. Right now, I think that it's the one thing that actually could be a global monetary standard in the future. Now, we're probably far away from that because I think it's going to take a long time for fiat currencies one by one to sort of die off, last one being the dollar. But I think that Bitcoin has the capability to serve as that base layer for a future economy that's more fair. Governments obviously some of them will fight it, some of them will embrace it. We'll see where the G7 stands on Bitcoin, I think, in the near future. But I do think that a lot of the other cryptocurrencies, they're just trying to recreate something that's already perfect. And again, they're at a disadvantage because it's not as decentralized. You could suffer a 51% attack. Some of them have removed the energy component entirely, so they have to introduce governance, which just recreates, in my opinion, a lot of the problems we have with fiat, proof of stake. The more you have, the more you get to verify, the more you get. So it's a lot like our current system. So I think Bitcoin's the winner here.
Yeah, I agree. Do you think any cryptocurrency has any value, or do you totally separate them? Like Bitcoin's hard money, and then cryptocurrency, there's some interesting tech out there, but you're not interested, or you are interested in some cryptos for what they're doing?
I see them as completely different. I really do see most of the space as securities. And in the same way
Yeah.
that I really don't choose to take the time to research every single stock and pick stocks out there, because it takes so much time and research. You have to understand what the future is going to look like 5, 10 years from now. What's the plan? What's the strategy? Who are the leaders? What problem are they trying to solve? Will that be a problem 10 years from now as technology evolves? There are so many unknowns. Whereas Bitcoin solves the problem of our money. It fulfills all the properties that make good money. So I would rather save as opposed to invest. And Safedine talks about this a lot in his books, and it really stood out to me. We used to be able to put our money away, and in the future, it either at least maintained the value that it had originally, the purchasing power, or in past times in our history, it actually went up. You could like put your money in an attic or in a mattress, and 10 years from now, it was more valuable. Today, it's the opposite. It's essentially just leaking air. It's like a melting ice cube, and so people are forced to invest. What do? They purchase real estate. They have to become landlords and property owners, or they invest in the real estate or the equities market, stock market. You can see how it's just ballooned over the last couple of decades. A lot of people choose to invest in index funds because it's simpler, right? But only a couple of those companies in the S&P 500 are the ones that realize all of the gains when you see a 7% appreciation, say in the S&P 500 over the course of the year. Most people don't want to have to risk their money. Investment has risk. Saving shouldn't. And I see Bitcoin as allowing us once again to be able to save for the future without taking on all this risk and needing to hire a portfolio manager or day trade on the side. So I know that might sound overly simplistic, but I look to Bitcoin as this possibility that someday we can just save. I earn my money, the fruit of my labor, and I can preserve it over time, as opposed to taking my money and trying to find yield, chase it in different areas, this asset class, that asset class, bonds at one point. That maybe that time can be over so that people don't have to stress out so much about where they put their money.
Yeah. It doesn't make any sense unless there's engineered like the fiat system to keep people working for their money to be inflated away. And I guess gold used to be the number one go-to to be able to hold that value. So the question is, like, I saw the video with you and Peter Schiff on RT Media. I think that's hilarious. Do you think if Bitcoin wasn't about, you'd be a gold bug?
That the next best option would probably be gold in terms of something that you can't easily inflate or manipulate. However, there are so many flaws to gold, in addition to the fact that you can't transport it easily, right? I mean, my parents, when they immigrated from Poland to the US, imagine trying to take a bunch of gold with you. You can't do it very easily. But also, it has been centralized. I mean, how do you audit the current supply of gold? Plus, they keep finding gold in other locations. So I just don't think that it has the benefits and the advantages that something like Bitcoin does, where, like you said, it's engineered perfect money. It's truly finite. It's truly scarce. It's portable. It's immutable. And I think that in the future, as technology really overtakes our lives even more and more, and we have, say, artificial intelligence that needs a natively digital currency, Bitcoin's the one, that the blockchain that you can truly trust, the one that is the most decentralized and the one that's technically sound, ethically sound. Michael Saylor, I think, is the one that came up with that kind of this is the blockchain that you can actually trust, the most powerful computer and trust network backed by energy. And I think that's why it's got the most potential out of any other asset class.
Yeah, and it's just got that continuation of TikTok next block. It just keeps working, doesn't change. I guess people lose their Bitcoin or their keys to be able to access, so it's deflationary at the same time. I really want to switch gears and talk about women and Bitcoin. It's something that you seem very passionate about. Can you tell us a little bit what this movement is and this mission that you're on to, and what it encompasses?
Sure. So when I started to learn about Bitcoin and study it, I obviously learned from all the prominent voices that I had on my show and who are on Twitter and have different programs themselves. And it was definitely skewed, right? I found myself always interviewing men. And when I would go to events like conferences, I went to my first Bitcoin conference in 2021. I was severely outnumbered, and my girlfriend and I were just commenting about how it's really hard to find women in the space, and I wondered why. And I would pose that question not just to others, but to myself, really, like, why do I think that Bitcoin has so many more men involved and so many more men are active on Bitcoin Twitter than women? And I really think it's because when you look at the fields and the industries that Bitcoin intersects, finance, technology, computer science, engineering, those are all very male dominated fields. And so I think that's trickled over and translated into Bitcoin as well. And I don't think it should be that way, because if anything, I mean, my girlfriends and the people that I'm close to and the women that I look up to in my life, they are so passionate about making smart financial decisions and saving for their future and, providing for their children and making really conservative decisions. And I see Bitcoin actually, people see it as very risky. I actually see it as a very conservative way to save for decades from now. And so I always felt like if women saw women out there and talking and having a voice, then they would feel more comfortable. They might see themselves in that woman and feel like they have a sense of community as well. So I wanted to provide an avenue for that. I've held some events, especially at the conferences, where I've just brought women together so that they can meet and network and build community. And I think that is like it's a drop in water that trickles out, and more people start to touch and connect after that. And I think that the space should be for everyone, young, old, women, men, everyone. So I hope to play a small part in just making sure that everyone understands Bitcoin and feels welcome.
Yeah, definitely from my end. You're doing amazing work. It's inspiring. And to see that more women, more men, anyone to be able to come into crypto and to be able to understand, especially what Bitcoin's doing. Now, there's this one question, and I'm not sure if it'll make any sense, but I found it quite interesting. And this is a question you asked somebody else. What is a P wave?
Oh, a P wave. Okay, so I've had really interesting conversations with Jeff Booth. Jeff Booth wrote The Price of Tomorrow, which is one of my favorite go-to books in the space. And he's also become a mentor of mine. I think that he just is so thoughtful and he's so positive, and he reinforces all the great things that Bitcoin, I think, stands for and what can make our society great in the future. And he studies the brain. I mean, he reads endlessly. And so he studies the brain, and a P wave is when let's say we're in a crowded room, right? And you're focused in on a conversation, but all of a sudden you hear your name in the distance. Well, that was a P wave. That was essentially your brain picked up someone saying your name, because at all times it was listening. It was actually taking in information, but filtering just basically everything out so that you focus in on one person and the conversation that you're mainly a part of, but it still heard your name. And so all of a sudden that P wave, your attention transfers, and it goes from the person you were talking to the person that just summoned you. And I just found that fascinating, because our brains are so complex. We have barely scratched the surface in terms of our knowledge. And for me, I'm really interested in learning more about the memory, because I think retaining memory is so important, not just in the future to be able to share your experiences with the people you love, but for yourself, to retain your knowledge and to build on all of the knowledge that you gain over your lifetime. And so I would like to have a better memory. If anyone has tips, please reach out. I'd like to study the memory more. And it's certainly a good thing to have a good memory recall when you're educating on Bitcoin.
Absolutely. From all the podcasts that I've seen, it looks like your memory recall is really good, actually, in the way you questions and how you can remember the facts and bring it through. It's another area of interest that I really need to focus in on is with my memory. A lot of issues with it, and it's just continuous improvement. Repetition's probably the biggest thing, but it's probably one of the biggest areas that I need to dive into myself. I want to ask about like the World Economic Forum. They've put out like a crypto white paper, which is pretty cool. But then I think maybe about 5 weeks ago, they put out this video advertising data centers and how they're good for the environment. They actually showed a Bitcoin mining faculty, like a thing. Do you think, I guess from a conspiracy point of view, these people, the World Economic Forum, the International Bank of Settlements, these are the players that control a lot of the world, our money supply, what's going on. Do you think they're putting out this information to seed people with propaganda that they are pro-crypto and crypto is here to stay? Or is it just, I'm just trying to link things in my own brain and then don't care about it at all?
I definitely think that the World Economic Forum is going to be among the organizations and agencies out there that push for central bank digital currencies and more of that top-down control, especially when it comes to any form of money. I personally believe that a lot of the folks in these agencies and in these power structures, they are misinformed about not just Bitcoin, especially because Bitcoin is so new and so revolutionary, and it really takes time to understand it and learn about it, but also about energy. There are so many narratives out there that energy is bad, or somehow we can transition to, supposedly renewable forms of energy in like 5-10 years, when that's literally impossible. And you're going to be starving people of economic opportunity if you even try to make something like that happen. So I think that we need to do a better job as a community to educate these folks and engage in conversations. What I really don't like is when people just fork off into two groups, and all of a sudden it's me versus you, it's us versus them, and there's no way to just meet in the middle for a conversation so that education can happen and knowledge can spread. When you feel someone's opposition, you're automatically closed off to them, right? Especially if someone has said something bad about you. I know that sometimes it's good to call things out, for sure, especially when it's based on truth and fact and records and all of that. But also, everybody's a human being, right? I mean, there are human beings at the World Economic Forum, probably human beings that want to save for their future and could become Bitcoiners, but who's going to engage with them? And how do we get that conversation to happen, as opposed to just saying, you guys suck, we're against you, you're against us, and all of a sudden we have this war going on that maybe didn't need to happen. I really believe that Bitcoin's good for anyone. Bitcoin's good for governments. It's good for the people that work in the governments. It's good for the average worker, the laborer. It's good for the people that are entrepreneurs and out there taking risk to create new companies and take their capital and invest it. So I would rather engage in a positive way so that people don't have this sense that, oh, it's this world, it's the CBDCs and surveillance and top-down control, or it's Bitcoin and the, we will never be able to bring them on our side. I disagree with that. I fully disagree with that. I think we just need to do a better job of educating people. The energy narratives really need to shift, because energy is good. We need more energy. There are lots of carbon emission-free energy sources like nuclear that we haven't explored enough. Bitcoin is making renewable plants like wind and solar economically viable, because it's a load that can easily turn off and can go anywhere. It's location agnostic. So I just think there's so much potential, and the more positive that we are trying to engage with the other side, I think the more we'll accomplish.
No, I agree with that. I guess being in crypto every day, talking about the news, it always feels like there's an attack going on. And I guess rightly so, they are attacking a lot of cryptocurrencies, which they see as a security, but it all gets wrapped up and then Bitcoin gets dragged into it. But when we look at it subjectively, at this stage, they're not going after Bitcoin. Well, I guess there's no one for them to go after. But then when you see the World Economic Forum come out with their crypto white paper, pro videos about data centers and your stuff, you think, okay, maybe long term they are just slowly stepping in, because they can't change their stance straight away without proper regulation, because people will mistake getting into Bitcoin with crypto, and then you are getting into unregistered securities. I know you need to go shortly. You've had some amazing conversations with the most incredible people in Bitcoin, within crypto. What are some of the key takeaways or the themes in common? Because they're people from all over the world, all different life experiences, and it just seems like the biggest, brightest minds have all verged in on the superior technology. Why do you think that is, and what have you learned from these people?
Oh gosh, I mean, I'm so grateful to be doing what I'm doing, because you just hit the nail on the head. I mean, some of the brightest, some of the smartest, most accomplished people have found their way to Bitcoin and have recognized that it is a superior form of money and something that they want to dedicate their lives to, because they think the future will be better. And more full of hope and opportunity than it currently is. And so I think the most interesting thing has been people from all walks of life find Bitcoin. And I think it's because there's something within all of us where the common humanity, the human spirit, is one that wants to strive to make the future better than whatever the present is and what the past was. We want to accomplish more. We want to produce more. We want to create more value. And also at the heart of that is the need to connect with others. I think all of us want to feel a sense of belonging, a sense of connection, and like we're doing something that's positive. The most happy people that I've met, and for myself, this rings true too, are people with a sense of purpose and deriving that purpose from being of service and helping others and providing actual value. And I think a lot of people that are lost today, it's because they don't feel that. They don't feel that sense of belonging. They don't feel that they have a purpose or that they can get ahead. They're just kind of on that hamster wheel, chasing after a sense of stability or security that it keeps eluding them and keeps going further and further away. The goalpost keeps moving. And so I've found that all of us that are in the Bitcoin space, whether they're prominent, CEOs of massive companies and billionaires, or the plebs that I get to meet all the time, and I'm a pleb too, we all just want to make the future better and be able to survive and plan for retirement and save and make sure that our money doesn't just run away from us, so that we can have fun and enjoy our lives and create value and create new innovations. And I think Bitcoin can really do that. And maybe that sounds overly optimistic, but I'd rather live in a world where I'm overly optimistic and striving for that than in a world where I just complain about all the problems, right? There are so many problems out there. Bitcoin's a solution, and I'd rather be focused on the solution rather than call out all the problems. So I love that the people that I've interviewed, they're all solution seekers, and they found Bitcoin and they believe in it.
Thanks so much, Natalie. For everybody watching, I've put all Natalie's links below in the description. Final thoughts, maybe just sum it up with one sentence. If people want to learn more, what action should they take next for Bitcoin? Because it's a long journey. There's so much going on, but what's the one simple little thing someone can do to be able to move forward?
Meet someone that you disagree with in the middle and have a nice conversation. And remember, the person is a human being that feels strongly based on whatever it is that they experienced in their life. And Bitcoin is something we can all agree on. So, why not try to spread that message, spread a little positivity? I think that Bitcoin can really fix a lot of the issues that are facing people in every country around the world who just want to make it. And the last thought I'll leave this on is, I know that even I talk about on my show now this idea of the powerful elite, the elite and the control and all of the concentration of power. It's very, very bad. But when you think in terms of just numbers, they are very, very small. And the people, the laborers, the workers, the mothers, the families, the fathers, the children, we are the many, we are the billions. And if billions of people want a freedom money, want a form of technology that can never be manipulated, that's truly scarce, truly decentralized, where we can transact value, we can have it. Numbers move mountains. We can do it. So I think each one of us can play a role in that. So tell someone about Bitcoin, especially someone who maybe you didn't agree with on other things.
Yep. Last question. Best book someone can learn about Bitcoin for the first time. What would you recommend?
A book?
Yeah.
My favorite's the Bitcoin Standard. So I always recommend that. That's my number one. I also mentioned Price of Tomorrow earlier. That's a fantastic book that really, really talks about why we have so much wealth concentration and what inflation does to society, especially one that takes on as much debt as ours has. The bullish case for Bitcoin's amazing. I mean, there's so many great books in this space. So.
No, great. We'll finish it up there. Thank you so much for hopping on, Natalie. Everyone, if you haven't read it, read the Bitcoin Standard. Amazing book, and then enjoy that journey. We'll see you on the next video. Peace. Thanks, Natalie.